Welcome viewers, I am Surbhi Unyal and I teach philosophy at Hansraj College, University of Delhi. We are doing a special lecture series on Introduction to Philosophy under the special segment of symbolic expressions. And we have with us Miss Manisha, who is going to interpret my lectures in sign language. So, within this lecture series on Introduction to Philosophy, today we are going to start with Indian philosophy. And within Indian philosophy, we are going to see what are the various schools that are there in Indian philosophy, what are the theories or central issues that are being discussed in various schools of Indian philosophy. So, let us begin. If you remember, in the last lecture, we discussed what is philosophy. And in discussing what is philosophy, we tried to understand the term from both Western and the Indian aspects. We discussed that from the Western aspect, philosophy means love for wisdom. And from the Indian context, the term equivalent to philosophy is darshan. And here the word darshan, it originates from the Sanskrit term drisht, that literally means to see or to behold, or vision, or means to vision. So these are various etymological meaning of the term darshan, which literally means to see or a vision or a means for vision. And here the Sanskrit saying is drishyate anen iti darshanam, which defines darshans as that which enables one to see. So in that aspect, it is defined as a means for vision or an instrument for vision. So the word darshan means vision and also instrument of vision. It stands for direct, immediate and intuitive vision of reality, the actual perception of truth, and includes the means which leads to this realization. What is this realization? This realization is the vision of reality or the perception of the truth. And that is what we are trying to realize, or that is what is the aim of Indian philosophy or the various schools of Indian philosophy, that they are trying to realize the truth or the ultimate reality. But now we have discussed that the term darshan means to see. What do we really mean by the term see? Do we mean that it is just a mere seeing and all the kind of seeing is to be considered as philosophy? So to see here means to know. It's not a mere seeing, like I'm seeing a chair or I'm seeing a table. That won't be considered as a philosophy. So when we are using the term darshan, which means to see, we do not literally mean that seeing. It means to know, it means to uncover the reality. So darshan means the vision to know about the real nature of anything in its totality. That means knowledge of the truth. And different schools in the tradition or in Indian philosophy have different theories on what is truth or what is the ultimate reality. While all the schools aim to understand the nature of the ultimate reality, and that can be seen as the common characteristic of all the schools of Indian philosophy, That means they are all trying to know what is the ultimate reality or what is the ultimate truth. And that itself means vision, or to see, or which will enable, or the means to know that kind of knowledge or the truth. So Indian philosophy, it refers to the diverse philosophical traditions that originated in the Indian subcontinent. So one could ask, what is Indian philosophy? How are we distinguishing Indian philosophy from Western philosophy and maybe Asian philosophy in a larger context? What do we really mean by Indian philosophy here? So Indian philosophy can be considered as these diverse philosophical traditions that have originated in the Indian subcontinent. So the term Indian here refers to the philosophical systems that have originated in India, encompassing both Hindu and non-Hindu systems such as Charvak, Jainism and Buddhism. While some scholars may refer to it as Hindu philosophy, that is not entirely accurate, as these non-Hindu systems like Buddhism, Jainism or the Charvak, they often hold critical views of Hindu doctrines. So, when we are using this term Indian philosophy, do not use it interchangeably with Hindu philosophy, and a lot of people make this mistake by using Indian philosophy as Hindu philosophy. So to some level, yes, Indian philosophy includes Hindu philosophy, but it's not its entirety. It does include certain other non-Hindu systems as well. So Hindu, if people are using only in the context of geographical sense to mean Indian, then from that aspect we can say that yes, it is Hindu philosophy because it has originated in India. But if you are taking it in a religious context, then it is not to be seen as synonymous to Indian philosophy, because there are various other schools which do not hold the Hindu beliefs or the Hindu doctrines, and they are in fact critical of those Hindu doctrines. So we need to be very careful when we are using these terms. Now the question arises that where does the root of Indian philosophy is traced in? So here we can say that the roots of Indian philosophy can be traced back to Vedas. And Vedas are divided into 4 divisions, each serving a different purpose. Fine. So though there are various Vedas, we are not going into the details of different types of Vedas in our lecture today. But what is of importance here in today's lecture is the subdivision within each of the Vedas. And these subdivisions include, the first one is the Samhitas, that contains the mantras or the verses used in rituals and ceremonies. They are considered the core text of Vedas and form the foundation of the Vedic knowledge. Fine. So amongst the first division in Vedas, the first one is Samhitas, and in this Samhitas we are only considering various mantras or the verses that are used in rituals and the ceremonies, and they are considered as the foundation of the Vedic knowledge. The second is Aranyakas. These texts provide instructions and guidelines for rituals, that how rituals have to be performed. So they give instructions and guidelines how these rituals and ceremonies, sacrifices and symbolic sacrifices, how they have to be performed. So they are often associated with forest dwelling hermits and contain mystical and symbolic teachings. The third is Brahmanas. These are commentaries on rituals ceremonies and sacrifices found in the Samhitas. The Brahmanas provide detailed explanations and interpretations of the rituals and their significance. Fine, so here we will be able to know, or these subdivision of Vedas tells us the commentaries on the rituals, what are its interpretation, what does it mean, what are its explanations, and also what are their significance. That is what we can find in the Brahmanas. The last is Upanishads. These texts delve into profound spiritual and philosophical knowledge. They discuss topics such as meditation, metaphysics, cosmology, ethics, and the nature of self or the Atman, and ultimate reality, that is Brahman. The Upanishads are considered the culmination of Vedic thought and are highly revered in Indian philosophy. So out of these 4 subdivisions within Vedas, we can see that it is the Upanishads where actually we can see the Indian philosophy has originated from. Though you will see when we will move further with our lecture, you will see that there is a school in Indian philosophy which is known as Purva Mimamsa, who is going to even consider other subdivisions within Vedas. But that we are going to discuss later. But do remember these 4 divisions. What are their significance? What are the aims of these different types of subdivisions in the Vedas? And specifically focusing upon the Upanishad for our present purpose. That it is the Upanishads which are dwelling profoundly in spiritual and philosophical knowledge. And they are discussing various philosophical issues regarding the metaphysical notions, the ethical aspect, or even the nature of the self or the Atman, and what is the ultimate reality, that is the Brahman. So Upanishads are considered as the foundation of Indian philosophy. Various systems of Indian philosophy are systematic speculations on the nature of reality, in accordance with the teachings of Upanishads, which contain different aspects of the truth. So you will see how various schools in Indian philosophy, they are influenced by the teachings of Upanishads or Vedas at large, and how the various divisions within Indian philosophy is actually based on this idea of how they are taking or how they are seeing Upanishads and Vedas. Now the ultimate goal of these philosophical systems is to attain knowledge of the reality and transform and spiritualize human life. So philosophical knowledge is not merely for satisfying theoretical and speculative interests, but for realizing the highest truth in life. And if you remember in our last lecture while discussing about what is philosophy, we discussed that philosophy is not just a theoretical subject. In fact, it is a way of life. We need to understand philosophy in how we are doing philosophy. So in that aspect of doing philosophy, it tells us to be speculative. It tells us to be self-interrogative or be self-reflective. And that is what you can see here in various schools of Indian philosophy as well. That all the schools, the ultimate aim is to attain that reality, to know that reality. And how would they know that? To know the reality, it could be speculative, it could be self-reflective, using the method of introspection. And that is where we are saying that it's not just for satisfying the theoretical perspective or the theoretical knowledge, but it is also speculative interest for realizing the highest truth in life, and that you can consider as doing philosophy. Now, let us see how these schools are being divided within the Indian philosophy. So, in Indian philosophy, which is also known as Darshan Shastra, schools are divided based on Astik, which is orthodox, and Nastik, which is heterodox, depending on whether they believe in the authority of Vedas as a valid source of knowledge. So, in the context of Indian philosophy, the term Astik and Nastik have a different meaning than their common perilous usage of theist and atheist. So, in our general understanding, when we use the term Astik or Nastik, when we say that this person is Astik or that person is Nastik, this term is used in a very different connotation as it is used in Indian philosophy. Fine, from the general understanding, we would consider Astik and Nastik based on whether they believe in God or not. So, those who believe in God, we say they are Astik, and those who do not believe in God, we say they are Nastik. But that's not what it means in Indian philosophy. In the Indian philosophical term, we need to be very careful that it does not mean believing in God or not believing in God. Why? Because etymologically, if you understand these two terms, Astik and Nastik, it means that Astik signifies the acceptance or existence, asti, which dividing this term Astik into asti and nasti in the Nastik. So, asti here means that something is existing, or asti can also mean the acceptance of something, while Nastik indicates the denial or non-existence. So, na asti. So, if you divide again this term Nastik, it would be considered as na asti, which means non-existence or denial of that same thing. So, in this case, the subject of existence or non-existence pertains to the sanctity of the Vedas or Vedic knowledge. Fine. So, I think it would be clear now that how do we use these terms Astik and Nastik in different ways in our common usage, where we are using Astik and Nastik on the basis of how one believes in God and not believe in God. So, again you can see asti from the context of believing in God would mean asti, that it is existing, and Nastik would be coming from the word na asti, that means not existing. So, you are denying the existence of God. And from the context of Indian philosophy, that something which they are accepting and denying is the authority of the Vedas. Fine. So, in this context, they are saying that these schools who believe in the authority of Vedas are the Astiks, and those who do not believe in the authority of Vedas, or those who deny the authority of Vedas, are Nastik. Fine. So, existing and non-existing of something, and in this context that something is the authority of Vedas. So, therefore, in Indian philosophical context, Astik refers to someone who accepts and acknowledges the authority of Vedas. It denotes those who believe in the Vedic teachings and consider them as the valid and authoritative source of knowledge. So, these schools who fall under this idea of Astik they believe in the authority of Veda and consider it to be a valid source of knowledge. On the other hand, Nastic refers to those who deny the authority of Vedas. It includes those individuals or those schools of thought who do not accept the Vedas as the supreme authority, or may hold a critical view towards Vedic teachings. So, these schools that fall under the Gnostic tradition, they deny the authority of Vedas, and in fact, they are very critical of the teachings of the Vedas. Now, what are those schools that falls under these two traditions? To the first group, which is the Orthodox or the Astic schools, belong 6 chief philosophical systems, popularly known as Shad Darshan. Why Shad? Shad means 6. So, these 6 schools that falls under the Astic tradition, they are often known as the Shad Darshan. And they are what are these schools? These schools include Mimamsa, Vedanta, Sankhya, Yoga, Nyaya and Vaisheshik. These are regarded as orthodox or Astic not because they believe in God, but because they accept the authority of Vedas. And within these schools, you can see that Mimamsa and Sankhya do not believe in God as the creator of the world. Yet they are Astic. Why? Because they believe in the authority of Vedas. Among the heterodox systems, the 3 main schools are materialists such as Charvak, the Buddhists and the Jains. These schools are considered as heterodox because they do not accept the authority of Vedas. So, we are going to stop here and we are going to continue our lecture and discuss briefly all these schools and what are their philosophies, their central issues that are present in all these schools, and have an overview of both Gnostic as well as Astic schools in our next lecture. So, thank you everyone and hope to see you in the next lecture to follow up what are the various schools and what are their specific perspectives on different issues. Thank you.